need that comfortable chair. Good
It's
evening, everyone. Good evening. I understand that we're live here. So welcome to our Wednesday evening fellowship. Our topic of conversation, of course, is Jewish spirituality and recovering from addiction. But also to broaden that a little bit, so that the classroom broadens and hopefully more people come to enjoy what we have been enjoying here for many years now, with a brief interruption in the middle, a very unique fellowship, a safe space, somewhere where we are sharing personal stories of strength and hope, and we draw energy from each other in our own journey. But I also wanted to add also this evening that this is not just about people who are in active recovery. It's especially for people who perhaps are struggling, and also with family members, with community leaders and so on, to really bring a greater awareness to the terrible disease of addiction. We have an expression in the book of Exodus that says, Ein bayis asher ein shameis, which literally means there is no home in which a dead person is not found, talking about the plague of the firstborn in Egypt. But really, there isn't a home that is not affected one way or another by addiction. So we would like to bring greater awareness and to let people know that the solution is not acting out, it's not using, it's not abusing. There is a solution. It's a wonderful solution. It is a spiritual program, whether it is the 12-step program, which is very much what a lot of what we use, or it's any other program, but it must be a spiritual program. So there is hope and so on. But this evening, we are very, very honored to have with us a great, great scholar and a world-renowned speaker and lecturer and so on. I personally had the great pleasure of last year, we spent a beautiful, beautiful weekend together at the Jewish Recovery Retreat. And he is a man of deep, deep wisdom and tremendous insight and great sensitivity. And of course, the knowledge is very, very broad, but especially in Jewish spirituality, and also particularly in helping people that are struggling with addiction. He has become in many ways one of the de facto spiritual mentors within the Chabad community and beyond, with his weekly videos, where he takes ancient Jewish spiritual tradition and really applies it to our day-to-day struggles, if you may. And so we really are honored that he's here with us tonight to bring greater awareness, to draw more and more attention to this wonderful space. Again, it's Wednesdays at 5:30, and it happens here. And it's absolutely magical, not because they put one person up in front of the video, it's usually me, but it's somebody that really sits in this chair, but really the magic happens in all of us sharing together, sharing our personal experiences, because again, in this room, as should be in any room, we don't preach, we don't make suggestions, we only share what worked for me. And so we hope that you will all draw strength and feel more comfortable to come and join us. So without further ado, Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. He's moving off stage.
You'll be in the hot seat. No.
Well, first of all, thank you for your very kind words. And it's always the most touching experience in life is to intersect with other souls. I always see it as a soul journey. They say it's not, we're physical beings on a spiritual journey. We're actually spiritual beings on a physical journey. So I really am always touched, and I thank Ellie and all of you here for making this happen, and it's an honor, a real honor to be here. I just want to say one thing about confidentiality, since it's so vital, and we all are sensitive to that. So though this is being streamed and videoed, but none of you are in it, and there will be plenty of time here to speak just between us. It'll be offline. So I just want to just alleviate anyone's concerns, if anyone has that. I'm not doing the housekeeping here, but I just thought...
The anonymity.
Right. Because, but on the other hand, why should we even do it online? Is for a simple reason. There are many people that are afraid to come to a room like this. and we need to be able to help them build the courage, everyone at their own pace, obviously. So, as we all know, healing is all about not just you healing, but not selfish healing, but selfless healing and sharing that. I'm just mentioning because I'm extremely sensitive to this. People speak to me all the time, and confidentiality is always at the top of everything. It's part of the sensitivity. So much of what was done to us was done in dirty secrets and dirty silence. So we have to respect silence and growing through that. I just wanted to say that at the outset. So again, a great honor. And I'll just speak, the best words are the words from the heart and to the heart. There's a group of young, what we call today teens at risk, like 18, 19, 20-year-olds, boys and girls that came to see me off the record a little while ago. And one of them knew me well and felt that maybe it would be useful just to have a conversation. So I said, sure. So it wasn't an on the record, wasn't a formal interaction. Usually those are the best. And as we sat down, these are all teens that were in rehab and coming out of either drug addiction or alcohol addiction or other substances, other experiences. So I just went around the table and I asked, tell me, nobody sets out in their life to say, hey, I want to become an addict. You've never met anyone that said, you know, that was my aspiration to become a drug addict. That's just not an aspiration. So how did you end up there? How did you end up trapped in such a dark place? Which they all acknowledged, of course, they were, and they were coming out of. And it was just interesting to hear the reactions. One person said, my home life was hell, was a mess. My parents were going through an ugly divorce. It was just a way of numbing myself and just being able to get through it. Another said I was terrible friends. Others were betrayed or abandoned. I mean, everyone had their horror story. And then one person said, frankly, I actually had pretty good friends. My family was decent, but I was terribly bored. I was terribly bored and I had a lot of energy inside of me and I had nowhere to go with energy. And so I was looking for some high and I couldn't find it. So whatever came my way. I remember one guy first offered me a joint and then they offered me a little drinking and then we went and played cards. I got stuck in gambling. It was all highs. I was just getting high. I wasn't getting hurt at the time. And the next thing I know, I'm stuck. I can't get out of it. I can't stop. So I was addicted to the high. And then everybody else weighed in. It was just interesting to me because boredom is usually not the thing you hear. It's such an innocuous thing. What's the big thing? Everybody's bored a bit. Who's not bored once in a while? Or more than once in a while. But the point I want to make is, which I shared with them, was the vacuum. Any addiction or any type of obsession for that matter, whether it's good or not good, is always filling a vacuum. And vacuums are very powerful because vacuums create tremendous energy, just negative energy. So when there's a vacuum, nature abhors a vacuum and the spirit, the human psyche abhors a vacuum. A vacuum can be very simple as, I have nothing to do today. And then somebody offers you some little exciting activity, good or bad. And I have to, just full disclosure, since we all are transparent, I'm an addict. But thank God I was never addicted to a substance. I'm just an addictive personality. And when I was a younger man, in my teenage years, I was lucky enough to find a healthy addiction. And that addiction was, and I'll share with you what it was, I was what I would say today, a rebel without a cause. And I was looking for something that really would change the world in some way. That's what my idealism was. I was a dreamer, a fantasizer, if you wish. I fantasized about these things. And I was in my mind, I wasn't drawn to any particular substance, I wasn't drawn getting high. I just wanted to be connected to that. And a long story short, it wasn't an easy journey. I came upon what is called, what some people would call today, mysticism, Jewish mysticism, Hasidic thought. You can call it Kabbalah. It has a lot of different names. The name is not important. It's Jewish spirituality, and it was like music to my ears. And I became addicted to this music. And I don't mean this as I'm trying to be cute here, because I know addiction is not a loose word to throw around, but it was addiction because it was not optional for me. It was like I was obsessed. I saw in it a language that spoke to my soul, and speaks to soul. Imagine you going into a doctor and he shows you an X-ray of your body, but then imagine someone shows you an X-ray of your soul. No therapist can do that. No psychologist can do that. And it was really that resonating experience that I say, you know what? Here's a picture of what we look like, that inner self. And it became my obsession. As a result, I guarantee you, if I had not found that, I don't even know if I'd be coming to a room like this. Because I probably would have, who knows where I would have ended up. I don't even want to imagine. But I realized from that addiction, the word addiction, of course, is a dirty word in a way, but it really means you're connected to something in a way you can't detach yourself. Now, there may be some attachments that actually would be quite healthy and holy to have such attachments, but they have to be to the right thing. And they have to be to things that don't control you, you control it. So attachment is not the problem, it's what you're attached to. So I want to just introduce two words. These are Hebrew words, but since we're talking about, as Shnei said, 3,800 years of text. You know, there's something about ancient wisdom that has power. First of all, it's lasted through the years, longevity. Secondly, trial and error. So I speak now as a proud Jew, as you can tell. I'm not dressed up. This is not masquerading. This is actually me. A real beard and a yarmulke and all that. And but I find that as the Jewish people, as you all know the history, have really gone through every form of oppression, every form of genocide, every form of trauma. So whatever we individually are going through, what the Jews went through collectively and also individually. So there's a lot of wisdom to be gleaned from a people like this. So the two words I want to introduce are, one is the word for unity, for connecting to something, attaching to something, unity. In Hebrew, the word is echad. Some of you may be familiar in the Hebrew prayer. There's a most famous liturgy, the prayer called the Shema, where it says, "Hear, O Israel, hear one God," the idea of oneness. You know, today we call it singularity, the unity, the ultimate unity theory, you know, in physics, the search for the unified field theory, forms of unity. Science is all about unifying fragments, and psychology is about finding some hub, some type of focus that connects our disjointed or fragmented lives. So the word is echad. Now, echad has a numerical equivalent. In Hebrew, the letters have numbers, called a gematria. So echad is 1, 8, and 4. So that's 9, 13. There's another Hebrew word, which is the word for love. Love, ahava. To love something also consists of 4 letters, and they also add up to the number 13. Whenever you have two words that add up to the same number, that means their spiritual connection is very profound. So what's the commonality between oneness and love? I think everybody understands. When you love someone, you feel connected to them. When there's hatred, there's divisiveness, there's disconnection. So connection and love and unity are all part of one idea. Now, you think about it, if you just would dissect in a very simple way the concept of being addicted to something. Just being, you're connected to something. The thing is, what you're connected to may not be good for you, but it's a connection, it's an attachment that you can find difficult to detach from. Whatever the reasons are, I'm not even getting into now what the void is and what caused us to be detached. So essentially, it's just a form of, we'll call it dysfunctional attachment. Or it's a form of what people call today attachment syndrome, that's attached to the wrong things. So the ahava is there, the love is there, the unity is there. The problem is you're connected and you're attached to something that is not good for you. Now, why would that happen to a person's life? Because we are fundamentally and inherent attached creatures. We are not singular individuals that are not attached. We are not an island unto ourselves. Now, you can make the argument and say, how do we know that? Well, think of a life, what would it be like if you were alone the rest of your life, you never met another human being? What would that do to would we go insane? Would we go mad? Would we be able to even survive? But it begins much earlier than that. And I always like to think of it, we were talking before, in technology they say let's say an iPhone 10 is better than an iPhone 9 officially, right? The next version is always better. I would submit that when it comes to life, the child, version 1.0 is better than version 2.0. And it goes downhill. But let's, from there. I know you can tell me, speak for yourself, but the fact is, we all begin our lives in a very interesting place. I don't know if you ever thought of it. You begin 9 months in your mother's womb. Whether you love or you hate your mother, that's where you began your life. And in your mother's womb, you were completely engulfed and submerged in embryonic fluid. It was, you didn't breathe on your own, you didn't eat on your own, you didn't drink on your own. completely protected in this womb. I mean, it's one of the most mysteries in medicine today. They still haven't figured out that whole stage in life, like what happens to the psyche. You know the physical development of the fetus, but what about the psychological development, the spiritual development? So I'm going to share a few thoughts about it shortly, but the point I want to make is that 9 months, complete attachment, completely nurtured. It doesn't get more nurtured than that. And it's not suffocating at that point. It gets suffocating if the womb-like experience is being re-experienced 20 years later. That would be a problem. If your mother is completely, completely consuming you. But at that stage, it's the healthiest thing. And I've always thought about this. The scientists are always talking about, like, why are we drawn to water? You know, we have beachfront property. We like to go swimming, oceans. We simulate it in a pool. So the biologists say the reason is because we were once amphibians. So we originate from the water. So we gravitate back to water. We're no longer amphibians. We're no longer fish. But the Kabbalists would say, the mystics would say, you know why we gravitate to water? Because water is the most attached experience. When you go underwater, what do you feel like? There's a certain peace and calm. Obviously, you can't stay there too long. But there's a calm. You're like surrounded by something that's not you. That's the ultimate imagery of love. You're surrounded by something not yourself. That means it's not your ego, it's not self-love. Something else is completely surrounding and submerging you. And that's exactly what happens for 9 months in our mother's womb. Now, I shudder to think, if we didn't have those 9-month head start, even with it, look how difficult life is. But without it, so we have actually in our psyches, etched in our deepest states of our unconscious, those 9 months. You don't remember it, I don't remember it. We don't even remember our first early years. But it's part of who we are. That's how we began our journey. And the reason for this, because it's the healthiest form of attachment where one person completely loves you. And the most fascinating thing is your mother can be completely dysfunctional. And still God made it in a way that her womb will nourish and nurture you. Now, obviously, I don't want to mention scenarios where mothers abuse their own fetuses and through drugs and alcohol. That's, of course, a whole other story. But we're talking about in a more regular scenario. And then after that, the umbilical cord is cut, and we begin our lives. And what is the first experiences in our lives, the way it should be, is again love. If your parents are healthy parents, they bring you home from the hospital. Now you're a separate entity, but you have no power of your own. So they have a beautiful crib for you and a beautiful blanket. And they're giving you the embryonic experience, except now you are a separate entity. And if everything was working well, if the template was perfect, that would be your life. Healthy parents validating you, nurturing you, loving you, healthy attachment, healthy love, and healthy unity. Everything is great. So we all wonder, of course, what happened? How did it get from there to here? You know, you ever look at yourself as a little baby in a picture? You sometimes say, how the hell did I become this from that? You were once this innocent, vulnerable, beautiful child, and hopefully loved and all of that. But things happen. And what happens is the detachments that begin, whether either parents are not available, abandonment on subtle levels, on more extreme levels. I'm not even talking about overt abuse and overt trauma. Even the most subtle begins to impact this little child, this little innocent, vulnerable child that each one of us sitting right in this room, we were once those people. Everyone on earth was once a child like that, believe it or not. This complex adult was once a little child, completely impressionable, and begins to experience the disappointments of life. I always wonder where children learn how to lie. You know, any of you have children? I have grandchildren. You always have to tell them, don't tell everything you see at home. They don't know how to lie. Where do they learn how to lie? Children are seamless. They're a complete, pure attachment. They learn how to lie from, you know who? Their parents, who tell them to lie. Or through osmosis, they pick it up. So what do you have? You have a situation where suddenly this healthy, attached child, with all going for it, is suddenly subject to all kinds of experiences that really go counter to the natural resonating truths that we feel. And then you're told, in the worst scenario, you're hurt, and they say, no, you weren't hurt. Something the matter with you. You weren't abused. What's the matter with you? Why are you making the family unhappy? I mean, I don't have to tell you all the nightmares that we hear. And then you start second-guessing yourself. 1 second. My instincts tell me something is wrong. Everyone else is telling me, people I love, or supposed to love me, and I love them, are telling me I'm wrong. So what do you think happens? So suddenly, if you think about it, if we're able to put this in like focus and magnify it, it's like an unbelievable tragedy. And by the time we're aware of it, when we become whether teens or adults, we start becoming aware the damage was done. Where this beautiful, attached, loving child who had everything going for it was ultimately detached. So what do you think is going to happen? You think this child is going to just take that lying down? Of course it's going to look for attachment. It's going to look for attachment wherever it can get it. Because it didn't get it in the right place, so it's going to go anywhere. Now, I'm not saying anything here that most of you have not heard. What I'm adding here is a little context to know, because the good news we have to get to, is that you didn't begin your life a victim or a survivor. You began your life in a beautiful, attached place. Every one of us. None of us were not prepared. So when we enter to whatever experiences we have now, there's plenty resources available within you. And that's the beautiful thing, within you. I always loved Michelangelo's line when they asked him, how do you carve those beautiful angels in the marble? He was a sculptor, an unbelievable sculptor. And he said the following words. He said, I see the angels trapped in the marble, and I carved and carved and set them free. Think about that. That's an artist speaking. He didn't create art. He saw it, but it was trapped. It was trapped like a diamond in the rough, waiting to be released. So some of us are trapped in marble, some in concrete, some in other substances, which we don't have to necessarily spell out. And we're busy trying to find that angel. But many of us think you have to find it on a shelf, or in a book, or in a film, or in a person, or in a help. Anyone that's going to help you in your life is going to help you carve and find it in here. So what you have going for you, and this, I believe, is the foundation of all healing, and all growth for that matter, for all of us, whatever background we come from, how hurt we were or not hurt, is your soul. To me, that is the most precious commodity, because that part of you is a part that is there from the beginning, long before any hurt, any scars, any wounds, and remains with you the rest of your life. The only question is, how trapped is it? And our challenge is how to free it. So the idea of attachment, I find that the more somebody is addicted, frankly, the more energy they have. You find mediocre people, their addictions are also pretty mediocre, you know? And people who are, I know, okay, there we go. So maybe we should have a prize for the most, you know. But listen, I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound too macabre, but frankly, corpses are not anxious. Corpses are not passionate. They don't have any addictions because they're dead. So the life itself is a sign of energy, and the more energy there is, what do you think happens with a lot of energy? Why is nuclear energy so devastating? Because it's so powerful. It can do great things and it can do horrible things. So I'm not saying that as a consolation that the more addicted you are, you should get an award, but you should know that the more energy you have, and the energy is, however, being channeled the wrong place. And whenever I see that, I see the creativity. You know, how creative addicted people can be, how they have to find some way to solve their need. I mean, again, everybody can know it in their own hearts. So the challenge is, how do you rechannel it? Not destroy it. Because that type of idea, abstinence, of trying to just stop it all, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with all the energy? It's all positive energy. I mean, on another form, for example, grief. When people suffer loss, death, there's grief. Grief is very powerful energy. The only thing is, it's energy that implodes. So the challenge is, how do you channel a grief toward positive ends? You'll see anyone that has ever grieved in life, and I've known a lot of Holocaust survivors in my own family and friends and community, and I see all those that really grew, they didn't forget what happened to them. They just channeled it. So I want to share two stories, and this is a talk we can go on and on. You have to have some limits here, right? The producer here. Cut off, man.
Not about the producer,
Okay.
it's about the people. If you see something reflected in the people around you, then you have to keep going. It's the only reason I'm here. Not because I want to be here, right?
Well, but I do have a flight tomorrow.
Tomorrow. That's the joke of the rabbi. There's a calendar on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, Simchas Torah, so Rosh Hashanah is coming at some point, right?
Exactly.
Okay. I want to share two things. I remember something that just left very deep impact on me. And that is, you remember John Bradshaw? Anybody heard of him? He's one of the pioneers in the early 70s that they called inner child work. He was the son of a pastor, and the father was a raving alcoholic, and he did a lot of work in that field of shame, unhealthy shame versus healthy shame, how he was ashamed to bring his friends home, all that you live with when the father, your hero, is an embarrassment, and worse, an abuser. So I don't remember what it was. I was watching, I think it was a PBS program. Maybe it was a video of it, I don't recall. And he was doing a workshop. You know, and I was somewhat like half cynical of these workshops. They were a setup, was it not a setup? But I didn't remain cynical for long. So there he has a group of maybe 50, 60 people in the room, men and women. And when I began listening to it, I hear in the background a thumping sound. And after a minute, I realized that he's playing a recording. The background music, so to speak, was the heartbeat. It was a heartbeat. You ever hear an amplified heartbeat? No. Pum, 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 pum. That was the background. And he's speaking in this very soothing voice. And he's telling everyone, this is the heartbeat of your mother. He asks everyone to close their eyes. He says, your mother, 9 months, this is the only sound you heard 24/7. When you're asleep, when you're awake. A heartbeat. Pum, pum, pum. I can't replicate it exactly, but just imagine a heartbeat. That's what you hear. And it has a very soothing sound, actually. It's very rhythmic. You know, it has a balance to it. It's of course, the very pulse of life itself. Contraction, expansion. And everyone's watching, and everyone's, listening. And he goes on. And he starts speaking like your mother would be speaking to you. I was like transformative, I have to tell you. I'm listening, and he says, the mother's speaking now to the child, and remember in the background is the heartbeat. And the mother says, I've been waiting for you my whole life. I can't wait to meet you. You know, God is sending your soul as a gift to this world. And I feel honored to be able to be your protector, your nurturer, your gardener. I prepared a special room for you in our home. White linen, fresh. Always know that I will be there for you. And he's going on like this. I don't even remember all the lines. It was, and the place starts crying, obviously. And I started crying too. I was watching it on screen, mind you. But it resonated like so deeply. And he goes on. And while all along is the heartbeat, the pump, pump, pump. Your mother waiting for you. And whatever you'll need in life, my little child, whatever happens, you can always come to me. Unconditional love. You know, it was to me like, then he stops at some point, of course, and the place is like stunned. I mean, everyone's quiet. They don't even open their eyes for a few minutes, or a minute, and I realized what he was saying, and then he says to them, so what happened now? I mean, he didn't even have to say anything, but he did. What happened here? Either you're crying because it reminds you of what actually happened in your mother's womb, or most likely, what didn't happen, and the lack of it, and feeling that you deserve to have heard that, and you deserve that love, because that's exactly what was happening for 9 months. You were surrounded by this heartbeat, and completely protected. What he did was, and what the impact it left on me, and it's years now, I saw this, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 40 years ago, was that we do have a model to retrace. It's not like we're lost. It's not like, okay, you know what? I got myself into trouble. Now how do I get out of this place? And the rest of your life is a struggle with your demons. No, you do have a point of reference. Not only that, you have that's you. That's the real you that you have wandered away from, that you have betrayed or was stolen from you. And the question is, how do you get back to that? And then I realized that everything I've ever learned, in all the mystical and the psychological and spiritual teachings, are all really about that. That when you say the word God, which is frankly a dirty word, I don't like to use that word. We've talked about this. Why? Because what does it mean? It means nothing. For most people, God is part of the abuse. God was that so-called superpower that all my abusive religious authorities worshipped. So who wants to have God in their lives when they have a God of that nature? But in truth is, and I'll translate it in my own terms, if you could define the purest part of yourself, the best part of yourself, it's your soul. You don't have to use the word God. You can use the word divine. You can use the word pure. You can use the word, I remember a word for years I was giving classes to people in the arts and entertainment industry, and they were very spiritual but not traditional. So I realized I was at a disadvantage because who knows how they're stereotyping me. So instead of the word God, I used words like higher reality, the essence of it all. For New Age groups, for more New Age style, I would say undefined layers of unconscious energy or something like that, you know? And yeah, and I went on, waxing eloquent about this higher reality, the essence of who we are, and connecting to it, following a blueprint until we reach this destination of total fusion between the inner and the outer, between form and function, between soul and body, between the unconscious and the conscious, the defined and the undefined. You get deterministic and the undeterministic for the little physics in there too. Why not throw it in? And after a few weeks, a guy came over to me, and he said to me quietly, he says, "Are you talking about God?" So I said, "Yes, but don't spoil it for the others." So I am talking about it, but I'm talking about it not the one that is the stereotype. I'm not talking about the one we grew up with, where the great Rabbi Barditchev, the great Hasidic master, said to self-proclaimed atheists, "The God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in." You know? So I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about you, the purest part of you. Whatever you want to call it, that spirit that allowed you to be created and born and not come unarmed. Come with all the resources, 9 months of that heartbeat, of that message, whether your mother said it or not, but that was the message. And that's your point of reference. All you're looking for is to regain that. You look at all the poems and the songs written from the beginning of time, they all are talking about how do we regain our innocence, paradise. We want to return to paradise. You know, you remember they say the number one film in history, they say Citizen Kane. At least some people think it is. And what is it all about, this mysterious rosebud? What's rosebud? You have to watch the movie 20 times to figure it out, frankly. But rose, I know I'm saying that because I thought I was stupid. Then I heard everybody else says, I also don't know what it was until someone told me, you know. So rosebud is a sled that boy, William Kane, who they say was Hearst or whatever it was ripped away from his family. It was the last scene in the snow where he had this sled. It was the symbol of his innocence. And every time in his life something major happened, and was also on his deathbed, he kept repeating rosebud. So it was this psychological symbol of we want to reclaim that purity. Who here does not have a positive memory from our childhood, even if it was not a healthy childhood? It's one of the best memories in our lives, those pure moments. You know, you went to the park. Even simple things, innocuous things. Those are the fragments that remain often that allow us to hold on to. So the challenge, of course, is now how do we get back, as I said, from here back to there? That requires, obviously, a process. But I actually believe that one of the great ways, I don't know how many of you dabbled in or worked with music therapy, but music has actually such power. You ever hear a song, it transports you to another time and place. A song reminds you of things, it can make you cry, it can make you laugh. So here's one of the things the mystics teach, that when the child is in the mother's womb, it's being taught songs. And the soul, before it came to this world, its language was song. The soul does not understand words. It only understands song, because song is a resonating voice. There are studies that show today that when you play music, the fetus, the developing fetus, reacts. They've seen the arms and legs of a baby in its mother's womb reacting to music. So I ask you, how does it know what music is like? Even language is a miracle, that at age 2 or 3 we can speak. How do we figure that out? But there you could say, okay, we're mimicking our parents or whatever it is. But song, and the answer is because song is the natural voice of the soul. So when you sing a song, something about it is very much water-like, embryonic. It's like feeling surrounded by song. You ever see it? Surrounded by the music. Put on a headset, you're just like, exactly like being underwater. So it has the same idea. So just another, more than another, I think it's a tremendous tool that's underused in helping us connect to that part of ourselves. Now this by no means is negating any of the therapeutic and the groups and all the methods being used. There are many different. The more the merrier, frankly, as long as it's working. But it's always good to have more resources that can also help you connect to who you are. Because I find the things that will be sustainable and lasting in our own healing are not the things that we impose on ourselves. It's the things that resonate most. The things that if you can access a deeper truth within yourself and bring that forth, those are the things that remain with you because it's inherent in you in the first place. The rule is in life, anything acquired is never as powerful as the inherent. So if you can access the inherent connections and attachments in a healthy way, that is something that can remain permanent, and you will not need the same type of work of keeping on imposing yourself new habits and new rituals. So look, time is of essence here. I wanted to just share a few words from the heart, which hopefully I did to some extent, in the context of the title of our getting together here. I wanted to share another story, but you know what? I think, let's take a pause here. And what comes next on the program, I'm not really sure. I could sing a song, actually, if you like. I have some ready. But we can do that afterwards. But I wanted to just keep a little balance here, so respecting everybody's time and schedule here. So, please. But before I do, I will say this. I will say a few more words. No. I wanted to just say, I want to conclude this first part where I began. I want to just extend my feelings. I feel that, as I said, there's nothing more sacred than interacting on this level. So many of us are, whether at work or home, we're in battle zones. We're competing. We're jealousies. There's all the different machinations we all go through. So to have moments of truth where you can just sit and talk and bare your soul and talk openly, and you don't no fear and no concern you'll be judged or you'll be looked at in some other way, I find to be extremely cleansing and healthy. And frankly, if I may use the word embryonic, because no one judges you when you're in that embryonic state. So I just wanted to again share my feelings of camaraderie, I guess, because at the end of the day, all we have is are each other. And the more we have healthy attachments among each other, the more it weakens the unhealthy attachments in our lives. So thank you for that. Sure. Well, it's always nice to have a guest. When they start becoming permanent, you never know what happens. They may never want to leave.
But you're talking about the idea of community, which is so critical to recovery.
Okay.
I want to have to reverse.
We'll find out after. It'll be too late. No, so you don't just
Okay.
Put it in front.
Now we're mamish. Every Wednesday at 5:30 we get together. The sages have a teaching in the ethics of our fathers: Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a mentor; uknei lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend; and to judge people favorably. And in many ways, these three are cardinal principles in the world of recovery. But not to focus on all of them. Of course, the first one seems to be self-understood. Make for yourself a mentor, the idea of mentorship. So once you enter the program, they encourage you to make for yourself a mentor, to find a sponsor, somebody who is going to guide you in your work, in your spiritual work. Very critical, extremely critical. But that we're not going to focus on today. The idea of uknei lecha chaver, acquiring for yourself a friend, which I think really is about the idea of fellowship and community. because in our suffering, in our insanity, in our pain, we imagine that we are alone in the world. There is no other human being who could ever understand what we suffer, how we suffer. And certainly, if any human being would catch a glimpse into our ugliness, we would be condemned for eternity. And that is something that contributes even more so to the guilt and the shame, which of course fuels this endless cycle of insanity, because I actually brought the book, but I'm not going to read from it, but Gabor Mate, anybody who wants some of the most incredible insight into addiction, where he describes in the first chapter the 5 different realms, but he describes the realm of the hungry ghost, which is actually the title of his book. And he describes this realm, the people who find themselves, who are trapped in this realm, because most human beings kind of shift between one or the other, but an addict is stuck in the realm of the hungry ghost. And there is an insatiable longing and thirst, but an emptiness. And it's, he once describes an addict, he says, because he's trying to understand addiction. And so he's kind of, interviewing his patients. And he says to this one fellow, he says, why do you keep using? And well, I keep using so that I don't have to feel what I feel if I don't use. So most people would never be able to understand that. We talk about this here all the time. It's perfectly normal to have had a stressful day, and at the end of the day, you carry all of that stress with you, and you're looking to take the edge off. That's perfectly normal. So whether you listen to music, or maybe you need a glass of wine, or you might even act out compulsively, but that is not the insanity of addiction. To the addict, and we talked about this last week, we talked about the idea of in that somebody mentioned here last week in this room that when he wakes up in the morning, in his first moment of consciousness, he's already fighting. He's already on the defensive. Already. So for an addict, it's what do you mean? I'm using to survive, because I can't sit with myself, because I can't stand to sit with myself. So if that's something that you identify with, then you must find your way to a room. And why is that? What is the magic? What is the power in that room? What do we find there in that room? We find uknei lecha chaver. First of all, we find in the stories that are shared in those rooms, we suddenly find, I'm not the only one. I see that other people struggle with some of the same things that I struggle with. That's powerful. There's also a community of people who are working a spiritual program, again, without preaching, but are sharing what worked for them, their own personal experiences, their stories of strength and hope. Very, very powerful. We find compassion in the room. We find acceptance in the room. We find healing in the room. And that's so powerful. To be part of a community. It's a safe space because there's absolutely no judgment there. Who would get up to judge somebody else? Seriously, right? Yours is uglier than mine. I mean, there is no judgment in the room. But there is an incredible power of a community of people who are searching for something, and they get together and everybody shares. So that's the idea of, and again, because it's broader today, and perhaps there are more people that are watching, so certainly if you're local and you want to participate in a community of people who are seeking something deeper and something higher. We always talk that for the experience of people that have sat in on meetings, again, I'm looking back at some of the group that's been here for a long time before, but somebody shared that he was working his program and his wife would say, all you talk about is the addiction, and the addiction, you're obsessed with this thing. Yes, maybe in the beginning that's what you're kind of obsessed with, But recovery is nothing to do with that. Yes, recognizing that my old roadmap was a broken, faulty roadmap, and it was leading me deeper and deeper and deeper, bringing me to death's door every day, every moment. And I couldn't imagine that there was any other way. Couldn't imagine. And some people can't help themselves. Because not to feel that and not to sit with that is even more important than their own life. That's how desperate they are. That's how desperate. But recovery is really about discovering a new spiritual path, a new framework, a new outlook. And typically the people who are in recovery for an extended period of time, who are not, it's not about the addiction or the disease at all. It is about working these spiritual principles. It's about discovering something, a deeper insight, a deeper way. But one more thing that I want to share with you, which is also what this is about. So it's 1935, and a stockbroker from New York who's been suffering from, he's an alcoholic for years and years and years, and not to go into all the details of the story, but somehow he's found that over the course of 3 months, nothing has worked. He's tried everything, okay, but he finds that when he feels the urge, if he reaches out and tries to help another alcoholic, somehow it relieves him of the urge to drink himself. And so that's what he does for 3 months, and he's been clean for 3 months doing this work, just doing for other people, getting outside of himself. But now he's in Akron, Ohio, and he's traveling there. He's staying in the hotel somewhere, and he suddenly feels this urge, and he doesn't really know anybody locally, so he's desperate. I got to talk to another alcoholic, because he knows that that's what works. He doesn't know why it works, but he knows that it works. So he describes how he's walking. His name is Bob, but he's Bill, excuse me. But he describes how he's kind of pacing between the bar and the phone booth, and he's going back and forth, and finally the phone booth wins. Thank God. And he picks up the phone book and he starts to call clergy to see if there's anyone in their congregation or anyone that they know who's suffering, who's struggling with, who's an alcoholic. And eventually he finds one that leads him to a doctor, yes, and he's been struggling with it, and his wife has been going crazy trying to help him. And of course the two of them together become the founder and the co-founder of AA. And that's something powerful in that. So we always bring in an idea of, because this is based on Jewish spirituality, but of course it's not exclusive. We have members of all faiths that are here, because spirituality, of course, is universal, and the spiritual truths of the Bible are eternal and universal. You don't have to be Jewish to appreciate them, to celebrate them. So we are just coming up on a holiday. We're going to experience this holiday before we see each other next week, which is going to be, God willing, on Wednesday at 5:30. But between now and then, we have the Festival of Purim. And not to take you through the whole history, but it's an absolutely fascinating story. And they wanted to kill us, we won, and then we sit down and we eat. No, that's the long short of it. But there's something interesting. So, and there are some fascinating dynamics about the story, but the story is that, yes, there was an evil man, and his name was Haman, and he was in a position of power. He was one of the ministers of the king at that time. And all of the Jewish population lived. This was a major king. His name was Achashverosh. And he commanded 127 provinces, and we were scattered amongst those 127 provinces. So, to make the long story short, the fate of the Jews are in his hand. And he allows Haman, one of his wicked ministers, to purchase the fate of the Jews for a few coins, and he can do whatever he wants. And Haman basically devises this plot that on a single day, all of the population will rise up against the Jewish population and wipe everybody out in one day. Okay? Do you know the story? It's a great story. But anyway, as it happens, because of something that had taken place a number of years before, the queen actually, at that time, was Queen Esther. The king had no idea she was Jewish. That's another story. There's a lot of stories. So she's there. And her uncle Mordechai, uncle or husband, her uncle Mordechai, who's a leader of the Jewish people, basically reaches out to her and he says to her, you're in that position and you've got to help us. You've got to go to the king and you've got to let him know that you're Jewish and you've got to do whatever you can to save the Jewish population. And Queen Esther says to him that, not very different than it is today, but this king was mad with power. Mad with power. And so if he didn't call on you and you called on him, so it all depended on his mood. If he wasn't in the mood to see you, he'd have your head. And she says she was his wife, never mind. But she hadn't been called. She could only go to him if she was called. She hadn't been called in 30 days. So she says to Mordechai, I understand it's an urgent matter and I need to ask for an audience with the king, but I'm basically risking my life here. And he says to her 3 things. He says, salvation will come, the Jews will be redeemed. If you don't take initiative, it will come from another place, right? Because God has many messengers, not a single messenger. And perhaps in doing so, in not taking initiative now, what will happen to you and your father's home? They will be destroyed. But then he says something extremely profound to Esther. He says, Umi odea, who knows? Perhaps it is for this reason, you may be wondering, I mean, for a young Jewish girl to end up as the queen to Achashverosh, to imagine what she was going through. And this wasn't for a day or a month, it was for years. To be there in that kind of environment, to have to tolerate, again, not to get into all of the details, but she basically, this was self-sacrifice every day for her to be there. And he says, maybe it is for this reason that all of these events brought you to that place so that you could serve as the agent through which salvation would come to the Jewish people. Who knows? But, so some people say, what do you mean, who knows? Who knows? In other words, it's a toss-up. There's a young man who just discovered that he's an addict. And we've been talking back and forth. And after his first meeting, he texts me, why me? You know that feeling, why me? Because when you're in the throes of addiction, so you're just so hyper-focused, you don't, there's nothing beyond just surviving and just, how am I going to get my next hit, or how am I going to set up my next acting out, and you're just so in the throes of it that you don't really think broader on any other, it's just, I got to survive. You don't understand, I need to survive, I need to survive, that's all. But suddenly when that stops, and you're not acting out, and you're not using, and you're sitting with your pain, and maybe you go to your first meeting, and you suddenly, it starts to dawn on you what insanity you've been dealing with, and how many relationships you've destroyed, and how much you've lost. We talked about the other week somebody describing a 40-year struggle with addiction. 40 years. What it means to lose 40 years before you discover. 40 years. It's the burden is so overwhelming that the only thing that you're thinking is, I better act out again, or I better use again, because this is too much for me to bear. Too much. Too painful. Too painful. Mordechai wasn't saying to Esther, well, who knows? Maybe it is for this reason, maybe it's not, because what's behind that? I mean, how does that encourage her to say, maybe this is my moment? Maybe this is your moment, maybe it's not. That doesn't sound very compelling if he's trying to sound very compelling. He's trying to weigh in on the situation. So he could say, listen, if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. Or he could say, well, if you don't do it, we're all going to die. Okay, that might be getting to me. But, hey, listen, you should do it because Maybe it's your reason for being, maybe it's not. Maybe God put you there for a reason, maybe he didn't. And I just want to tie all of these things together because you realize something. That once we turn ourselves over to the care of God of our understanding, and once we realize that it has nothing to do with us, it's all about him, because the car is his, and the 20 bucks is his, and the home and the family is his, and everything belongs to God. And I am only here to serve his will for me. And that's what we pray for every day. But one of the powerful things that happens in the room is that we're able to reach out and we are able to be in the service of other people. And that's not what Mordecai is saying to Esther is, no, this is, if you're here in this situation, then of course, this is your destiny and you're meant to be there. Now, mi odea, in other words, means, but it's something that we can't ever grasp because most human beings could never grasp why God would put them in this way. Why me? Why me? I mean, why couldn't I just be like everyone else? Why do I have to be the one suffering with this? Why did I have to lose 40 years of my life? Why is it that in my first moment of consciousness, I'm not even comfortable sitting with myself? Like the rabbi said before, no one has ever invited this onto themselves. No one has ever invited this onto themselves. No one has ever wished for this, which again is something that I think we need more and more awareness in the broader community because, of course, but you were enjoying it. Come on. No, hating yourself while you're doing it. Again, Gabor Mate describes one of his patients as talking, and he's talking about how I think it's meth or whatever it is that he's using, and how it makes him nauseous, and he hates it, and he doesn't even like it. But since he took the first hit, and he does this every day, he does it over and over and over and over again. And he says to him, so why do you do it if you know that you're going to feel sick and you can't stand it and you hate it and you don't want to be doing it? Because to him, he doesn't have a choice. It's about his own survival. So you say, why me? But to imagine that God has a unique plan for each and every one of us. And this is his plan. As I heard from somebody else in this room that said, a victim of child sexual abuse, that if he would be given the choice to rewrite his life story, he would write it with his abuser in it. Now, mi odea, nobody could ever understand why this is the unique journey for me. But if we accept that God has that unique journey for each and every one of us, and that through our awareness, we are in a position to be able to help so many other people by sharing our strength and hope. By sharing our strength and hope. And perhaps one day we do reach a place where we say, maybe not ani odea, that I know fully and I understand fully, but I accept that this is the mission for me. Okay? Yeah? To conclude. Yeah. But before you shut it, he wants to say a concluding note. You stopped it? Okay. Oh, the mic.
Why not?
Okay.
I've been accused of worse. This? I want to say, because we're going to be concluding now the live stream and the recording, then opening it up. It's always good to conclude with something of action. So I just want to throw out a suggestion. Maybe some of you do it, maybe not, but it could always be done. with more power. At the end of the day, we need exercises, we need tools to, and I'll just refer both to what the Rabbi said as well as what I said earlier, of accessing that inner soul, that pure part of yourself that may be undercover, in hiding, afraid, has not really expressed itself. In the words of Oliver Wendell Holmes in that devastating poem, he says, for the voiceless, he says, "Alas, to those that die with their song still inside them." So, to access that song, so there's this, goes back, this is probably thousands of years of tradition, that every morning when you wake up, as soon as you wake up, before anything else, there's this one-line prayer, meditation, chant, whatever you call it, which in Hebrew is called the Moda'ani. But in simple English, it means thank you. So there you have right there gratitude, which we know is a tremendous healer. Focus not on yourself, but the gratitude to those that have helped us. Thank you for returning my soul to me. You don't even use the word God, because you can put whatever you want, you can use any word you want, God, of your understanding, or whatever the word is. For returning my soul to me. That doesn't just mean to give me another day and waking up fresh in the morning. It includes that, but it's much deeper than that. It means for renewing my contract. The words that you just said, eloquent words, for choosing me to be here and now for a unique and indispensable mission. And I use the word indispensable very deliberately. No one else can do it but you. So you can use this meditation, this prayer, any way you like. But I believe that if you say it every day with intent, not just mechanically, it can change your life because it recalibrates, it refocuses your lens. How to look. You wake up, fresh morning. You don't have meetings yet. Nothing's happened yet in the day. You're right away saying, what is the hub? What is the center? What is the purpose, in a way, of my life? I think that's a tremendous exercise. Done consistently, becomes something that is your habit every day. It's a great way to focus, and you'll see the rest of your day, you'll remind yourself that of your inner soul. Second thing I would say is an evening prayer, which is similar, that says, I entrust in your hands my spirit. Which is like before you go to sleep, instead of falling asleep with the television on, or with your phone in your hand, or with a newspaper on your nose. Don't bring your whole day to you when you're going into that restful place. End the day with something spiritual, something soulful, something emotional. You can't imagine these type, b'yot chav kidruchi. It means, in your arms I trust my spirit. It's essentially also trust, recognizing there's some higher purpose, some higher spirit. And finally, I want to say something about the passion. At the end of the day, we only have that much energy. It either is going to go into negative stuff, or it's going to go into positive stuff. So as soon as you begin to channel passion, and I'd say addiction even, and anything that's compulsive, into something positive, what do you think is happening? You're weakening the energy that's going into the other side. So find yourself a cause, if you haven't yet, something you volunteer for, help special children, do something online, send nice messages, something you can invest passion in. And remember, that passion is going to wean and weaken the passion that you have in other areas. It's inevitable. It's just like when you're busy one thing, you can't be doing two things at once. Those are my three, I've just suggested exercises. Yeah. And with that, let's bid the online audience adieu. Good night. And if anybody wants to contact at least me, you can contact me at meaningfullife.com. How do they contact you if they want to?
Wednesdays at 5:30 here.
Give the address. What's the address? Give the address.
What's the address?
20,000
Northeast 15th Court.
in North Miami Beach, right?
In North Miami Beach.
Right.
5:30 on Wednesdays.
Okay. And, okay, be well, everyone.